You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly ReQua, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk.
This is Polly ReQua, host of Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk, and this episode is sponsored by BarkBox. What is BarkBox? BarkBox is a delivery of 4 to 6 natural treats and super fun toys curated around a surprise theme each month. My 2 dogs love it when BarkBox arrives. They go nuts. All of the treats are made in the United States or Canada. BarkBox offers free shipping in the United States, and if your dog loves something, check out barkshop.com to easily find it again. For a free extra month of this great product, visit barkbox.com/barkvet when you subscribe to a 6 or 12-month plan. You're listening to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. I'm your host, Polly ReQua. Today we're talking to Dr. Susan McMillan, owner of Vet-to-Pet Mobile Veterinary Service in Burlington, Vermont. Welcome, Susan.
Hi, Polly.
Today we're going to talk about distemper. What is it and how do we prevent it from our dogs getting it?
Okay, that can be a pretty easy discussion. Actually, distemper it's kind of a misnomer, but it's a viral disease. It's really contagious, and it's something that dogs get typically from each other, but it can be seen in all kinds of different animals. Including, all of the wild dogs, raccoons, a whole lot of animals. It's related to the measles virus that we get, but it's not. You're not going to get distemper from your dog, and you're not going to give your dog measles. That, luckily, at least at this point, that we're not crossing species like that yet.
And so, what does it do?
So, it's like I said, it's really contagious. It's spread by, we call it when something gets aerosolized. So that basically means you cough, you sneeze, and bodily fluids get aerosolized into the air, and then other animals can pick it up. So initially, if your dog isn't vaccinated, you can have these problems. For anyone who's listening, if your dog has received their basic puppy vaccines at the right timing, all the way through till they're 16 weeks old, you're probably never going to have to worry about this, because these symptoms are going to sound familiar to anyone who's had a dog, because the symptoms are kind of generic. But initially, the dog might have just a fever, and that would, the way you would know that is that your dog would just be lethargic. They may quit eating for a couple days and just be really low. And that, if you took their temperature, you might find out that they had a fever. It might just last a couple days, and they might clear it, and you will never know that your dog actually was exposed to distemper. But it can also cause more kind of intermediate and severe symptoms also. So the severe symptoms are more in the GI, respiratory, and neurologic areas. So they might have a lot of nasal and ocular discharge, all kinds of basically stuff coming out of them. Their nose, their eye. Right, and that's the part that's real contagious. They might have GI signs. And if the dog doesn't clear the virus, if they start to get into a longer term illness going into days and then even chronic, then they can start having this thing called encephalitis. So that means you start having neurologic signs. So you can see convulsions, you can see twitching. It can be mild or it can be real severe. And I assume that's where the name distemper came from, because it can actually be confused with rabies, because they can start having weird convulsions, drooling. So symptoms that we would more typically, we might jump to the conclusion that it's rabies. And that's often what you'll see. If you see a sick raccoon, it might be rabies, it might be distemper. I mean, in any case, you want to stay away from it. But it can look similar to rabies. if you get into a real severe case of it. But to get back to the dog population, again, you're not going to encounter this unless you are dealing with dogs who are not vaccinated.
Okay.
So, if you start getting into the shelter populations, if they don't vaccinate as soon as the dog enters the shelter, and definitely there's certain communities where we don't get to vaccinate our dogs as well as we'd like to, that is where you're going to start seeing distemper outbreaks. So
it's not very common.
It's not, I'll have to say in my practice, it's not very common because the communities I've lived in, people, for the most part, we generally vaccinate most of the dogs. It's just like when your kid goes to school. If
Sure.
most of the kids in school are vaccinated, you're not going to get an outbreak of something. If most of the kids in the class aren't vaccinated, then you're starting to get into more of a chance to have an outbreak. So in my world, distemper is very uncommon. I'm sure there are places where it's more common.
And is it only one shot, or is it multiple shots like the rabies?
It's multiple. So when you're a puppy, if you're doing everything right on time, you would probably start getting your vaccines at 6 or 8 weeks. We often, honestly, don't see dogs till they're a little bit older. So if you started at 10 weeks, you could do 10 weeks, and then you would do it 3 to 4 weeks later, and again 3 to 4 weeks later. So initially, it's even more than the rabies vaccine. And then in my practice, I really try to do as few vaccines as needed to maintain the animal's health. We used to do the distemper vaccine yearly. Now we do it. A lot of practices have read the research and they do it only every 3 to 4 years. So once your dog's an adult, they will get it way less frequently. And that's definitely something you should talk to your vet about if you feel like your dog is getting too many vaccines or you just wonder about how many vaccines they're getting. You should always ask your vet because your dog should get the vaccines that are appropriate for your dog. Like with your pets, Polly, Chuck does not necessarily need the same vaccines as Maddie because Chuck doesn't leave the couch. Right. And Maddie goes out, Maddie goes out into the world. For any of you who don't know Polly, Chuck is an old pug and Maddie's a young, lab mix, right?
No, she's lab. But yeah.
All lab.
But she'll eat anything.
Right, so they should have different vaccine protocols because of both their age and their lifestyle.
Sure.
So you should be, I know you do, but your people listening, make sure that your vet is listening to what your dog's life is like before they just automatically do 5 vaccines every year.
Right.
That's not a good idea.
Right, I think that's how people are moving forward.
Yeah, most people are realizing that. And that's a whole nother discussion. I won't get on my soapbox about that anymore. Sure. But
I appreciate you being on the podcast and learning more about distemper, since you really don't. Some of these shots, when you go into the vet, you're not really sure why they're getting it or what the actual illness is.
2 things I should say as a caveat. One is the distemper is usually rolled into a 3, 4, 5-way vaccine. So it's kind of a package, and you can talk to your vet about all of that. And the other is, I don't mean to downplay that we see distemper so infrequently that, my puppy doesn't need it. I definitely don't mean to do that. So
sure.
I do want us to all get the basic vaccines, then just be intelligent and ask questions after that, I guess.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much, and we look forward to having you back.
You're welcome, Polly. Talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk is sponsored by BarkBox. What is BarkBox? BarkBox is a delivery of 4 to 6 natural treats and super fun toys curated around a surprise theme each month. Choose a dog size, choose a plan, 1, 6, or 12 months, and receive your BarkBox in the mail. BarkBox is committed to making dogs happy, working with local and independent businesses. BarkBox supports shelters, rescues, and nonprofits, helping dogs find their forever home. Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk loves their mission. For a free extra month, visit barkbox.com/vet talk and receive an extra month when you subscribe to a 6 to 12 month plan.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.